it going? As always, Nate Mumford, Director of Sales Engineering here at RCS. Time for another RCS Live. We do these on Thursdays, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and we talk about various RCS products between Zeta and G Selector and Acquira and Zeta Cloud, and of course, Revma as well. We have a lot of really cool things to talk about. As always, we have our chat open here as well. If you have any questions in regards to streaming, as you can tell, I'm ready. I have my summer of stream going on over here, summer of streaming. And so if you have any questions, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitch, we're on X, we're on Facebook and all that good stuff. So you got questions for me, let me know. We're going to be on the road as well. I believe the next show, at least for me, is going to be Texas, the Texas Association of Broadcasters, TAB. That is the second week of August. Then I'm going to be in Ontario later in August, and I'm going to be in Ohio as well. I believe that it's the beginning of October, and there's a couple other events sprinkled in. So if you're going to be out and about at some of these radio conferences, please reach out to us, and we can schedule some time and have some one-on-one back and forth and show you some cool things you can do with either Zeta, G Selector, as I said, Acquira, Revma, Zeta Cloud, or even some of our newer products like Audio Display and Sound Center as well. Of course, if you ever miss any of these RCS Lives, we have a full archive over at rcsworks.com/RCS-live. And that has a full, we did 150 plus videos of tips and tricks across all products. So if you're curious, that's definitely a great place to go. If you, I'm the first one to tell you, I'm talking about a lot of stuff. If you're curious about a specific topic, please reach out. I'd much rather maximize your time. And if you're like, I'm looking for a video about X, let me know. I'll throw it out to you a couple suggestions, and we probably have them. It's probably easier for me in my own mental archive to tell you, hey, this is a video I want to watch, than, just kind of going around and just trying to find yourself. But that's up to you, your choice. And as I said, we have our chat open as well. Make sure that is going over here. Fantastic. And so today we're talking about Revma. It's been a little bit since we did a couple Revma RCS Lives. So again, referenced in previous ones over on our RCS archive. Otherwise, let's dive right into and talk about some of the new features we've been doing in the Revma world. First things first, hey, don't make fun of my 0 listeners. It's just me. So if I'm talking to you, I can't be hearing my own demo station while also talking to you. So bear with me. But I want to do a little 2-second recap of Revma. Revma is our streaming content delivery network. The idea is that we take whatever encoder you want. One of the beauties about Revma is that we don't kind of restrict you to certain bit rates. It's whatever your encoder is. We replicate that. And it really is kind of what you want out of your streaming provider, right? That's kind of the biggest thing with the Revma world. And there's some really, really cool new features we've been doing in Revma as well. So I'm going to jump here to my stations. And I'm going to jump over here to, actually, before I do that, I want to just quickly show you my my monitoring over here as well. Again, don't make fun of my analytics. Don't make fun of my streamings. It's just me. I have a bunch of Nate music on there I listen to all the time. And so one of the great things about this is a great snapshot to say, here is my cluster. What's going on? Let me see my stations. Are they running? Is there the primary? Is there a failover? How's the encoders looking? The connected stations, total listeners, all that good stuff. This is a great heartbeat for essentially your streaming from an administrative or engineering perspective. So that's a really, really cool feature as well. I know we showed it in the past, but I kind of want to just give you a little refresher on the Revma world. And again, any questions, I'm here for you. So Paul, got questions, let me know, okay? We're going to focus on today is the brand new silence failover and some of the user roles we have here too. I'm going to jump to my Zeta Cloud Classic Rock 2024, which is my new classic rock station I was building. And again, I know if you see some listeners here, don't forget streaming is global, right? We have listeners streaming all across the world. So that's why we have a world map here. These will light up green when you have some people listening. So shout out to Corey. Corey, go quickly and go listen to one of my streams, all right? So we can get at least one listener. I know we're all counting on me. So of course we have the metadata here on the right-hand side, our streaming information. So yes, if you're viewing this and you're like, oh, I want to go and stream Nate's station, go ahead. It's a bunch of stock classic rock footage here for you. I'm going to focus my attention here first with the really cool feature, which is the failover, right? The silence failover. So just a little background as a reminder for how Revma treats your backup redundancies. So the idea is that in Revma, as part of our contract, we give you both a primary and a failover URL. So the idea is that you have, in theory, a nice fancy encoder that's on a machine. If anything happens to that and goes down, maybe you have some type of free encoder as a backup. That's included in your Revma package. And so what we do here is we essentially define what that failover server address is here. And again, once we take that, we essentially go and say, all right, here's the primary, here's the failover. What we're talking about here is going to be silence detection. It's a slightly different behavior than if we lose a heartbeat connection to your primary encoder. So from your perspective, treat this as a primary, right? And then a failover. And then if we have essentially an automatic failover if we lose connectivity to the primary versus a silence detection, right? There's a subtle difference in the two of those type of behaviors. And obviously some users, you can have both in there, right? But the beauty is with the silence detection, it's going to be an automatic for you. And we'll talk about some of those settings in just a second. So again, and you'll see some terms here too, like relay. What relay is let me boost this up a little bit for you so you can kind of see a nice, is that better for, yeah, let's do that. So relays are going to be essentially a in addition to. So think of it, if you're broadcasting with an encoder at 320 kbps and you essentially want to have multiple high, medium, low resolution, you can essentially purchase additional relays at a discounted price to have that same main. Again, this is a content delivery network, so it's a CDN. I can take that main 320 and then have essentially a 192, 128, and let's say like a 64 or something like that. Right, Mark? You're checking in? Thank you, Mark. I love when you check in. But of course, you know what I'm talking about, right, Mark? And so think of it as, in case you're not curious what a CDN is, think of it like a surge protector, right? You have one outlet, has multiple outlets in there. And the idea is we plug in the one surge protector that gives us multiple outlets to play with. That's the 192, the 128, so on and so forth. So again, just some vocabulary here for you. Primary, failover. We have a heartbeat sensor as well as silence detection. And you have your primary as well as a relay in the mix too. So you might see some really advanced configurations with some failover relays. We can do that in Revma, which is pretty cool. If you want to talk about some of that advanced stuff, let me know offline. We'll have a chat about it. But I'm focusing really on this guy right here. Persistence to failover source. And so the idea is, again, if I lose the heartbeat sensor, so if I cannot communicate with my primary encoder, by default, we will then go to your failover stream. That's already been built into Revma. That's already there. This is more of a silence detection, more of a quick instant kind of switchover. As you can see the need for both, right? So for example, if a audio path, your encoder could be still online, but you lose something there, you need some more redundancy in that process. And that's why we have the silence detection in place here. So by default, this is important to note, right? By default, we enable this silence detection for you. If you want it deactivated for whatever reason, every user is different. You can reach out to RCS support. We'll go into the back end for your settings and we'll essentially disable the silence detection. But at the end of the day is most users want to keep this enabled, right? And so the idea is that you want to have always persistent. Some users have very unique programming, typically for it's kind of the content and the type of programming you're airing. Some things can't go over the stream. Some users want to block the stream for a period of time, whatever it may be. I know here in the States, that's more of an international thing, but once again, there could be something in there where you're okay with a little bit of silence over time because you still have that heartbeat sensor to your encoder, right? And so you have always persistent, which just means if I hear a period of time with silence, I forget the exact, it's a couple seconds in there, we will switch over. Otherwise, you can define a switch to primary after X number of minutes. Oh, sorry, this is the from the failover source. And so one of the things that we want to do here is really talk about what happens back and forth, right? So one of the things that we do is obviously we have connectivity. There is the concept of how we go back and forth, right? And so maybe it's like, hey, if I have silence detection, I'm going to jump to the silence one. Maybe I want a couple minutes to wait on that. Maybe I want to deactivate it. But also, if I have an encoder, my primary encoder that is essentially losing, booting back up and losing again and booting back up and losing again, we don't want to keep on switching and losing our listener session, right? We're not going to keep pivoting from A into B. And that's going to allow you to have a little more power here by switching to the primary after X number of minutes of silence detection in there, right? So that's a really, really cool feature. And by the way, a little little subtle thing that you might not realize here if you're a Revma customer is we've been really building out this little drop down right here, knowledge base. Ooh, let's click on that for a second here and look. Oh, hey, check this out. This is pretty cool. Kudos to Alex and the Revma team over here. This is a knowledge base that's been building over some time. And so maybe do something over here, like let's search a term, for example, let's see what I'm doing, silence, something like that, right? So let's see, switch source on silence, stream alerts, Revma events, navigating Revma station. Look how cool this is, switch source on silence. Ooh, look at this great little article on what's going on. And this is a really helpful tool here in the Revma knowledge base. Again, I got to here by simply logging in, little drop down here. Of course, there's help and support, but that knowledge base is a great resource we've been building over time here in Revma. So if you want some assistance in there on your own time, that knowledge base is huge. So kudos to Alex and the Revma team for building this out. And as you can tell, we're building this as we go. So there's a lot of great resources on here. So for example, maybe I want to look at something like a user, right? Something like that. Ooh, what's this? Revma user roles. That looks brand new, Nate, because it is brand new. We now have the concept of a typical admin user. They get to see everything across the board, but we introduced 2 more roles. And this came from a lot of users working inside of Revma, essentially a tech admin and a now analytics viewer. The idea is that the tech admin need to see some specifics like the session rules and the settings. However, the analytics viewer, we don't really want to have them touch some of those settings. So we really want to have them focus on the analytics instead. So think of kind of almost like a tech, right, versus a sales aspect or more of a program aspect. I want to see my numbers, but I don't want to make a change to some of my actual settings in Revma. That's what we're doing here. And that is over, if I go back over here, going to my settings, scroll up, you'll see there's a people sub-tab. I can essentially add people, and you can tell there's staff, tech admin, and analytics viewer. That's the idea there. And so what it allows me to do is essentially define multiple roles inside my Revma. And again, if you have one organization, and then from there you have individual stations, you can start really getting granular on some of those user roles, which is really, really cool as well. And of course, little things too, we can, have applications where we can get your tune in, meta, I can say this, hold on. We can get your applications, we get your tune in metadata shared across as well. There's some really cool things you can do for our session rules as well. I'm going to pop back here to essentially this right here is my pre-roll ad that I made on my stream itself. I'm going to go back for a quick second here, hitting that home button. That's my main one. Go to my session rules. This is where we start defining some really cool things. And we're seeing a lot of users doing some really interesting stuff in regards to ad revenue with some Triton ad replacement as well, using a vast interface. And the idea is that we can essentially go through Triton's campaigns, schedule spots, and all of that. And that's on the Triton side. So if you want to make some additional revenue on your stream, you can go, and we partner with Triton to essentially have all these great, I kind of call them overrides, but essentially when the spot block starts, we say, hey, we're starting a spot block over in Zeta. We fire over to the Triton. We replace those streaming spots online. We say we give a duration. We have 3 minutes. Replace this 3-minute spot block with spots. Once, of course, those spots air, you get revenue, right? For very minimal work, because the idea is that once we see the metadata inside of Zeta, we queue the Triton ad replacements. We assign those to specific stations. We can schedule campaigns, all of that with Triton. There's some really cool things you can do here too. And yes, there is. I'm a little more of a disclaimer person from my point of view. We do geo-targeting and geo-groups and IPs. The disclaimer there, of course, and any streaming provider should tell you this. Obviously, if I have, let's say, something where I can't have these IPs or these geographic areas, these hot zip codes cannot stream this element, that's all fine and dandy. But from a technical standpoint, if I have a VPN, then I don't get that IP address. I don't get that geographic area. So we do have to say, if, we have geo-targeting enabled inside of Revma, but of course, that includes users who are not using VPN access to mask their source of how they're streaming. So that's a little disclaimer there for you too. But there's some really cool things you can do inside of Revma as well. So last call for questions here today, just in case you're curious over here. But once again, we're talking about Revma, our content delivery network. We have our monitor here to see all of our stations, right? Making sure they're all online playing. And again, we have the primary and we have the failover. The idea is there's a silence detection. If I don't have a heartbeat to that encoder in the primary, flip over to the failover, right? And then, of course, we have the silence detection now built in as well. So we can essentially say, all right, if I have a silence, I don't hear anything, I'm going to fail over to my backup, and then I'm going to return back at a certain time to my primary encoder. And there's some great, behaviors in there too to kind of save you from yourself, to make sure that we really, at the end of the day, the idea here is from an engineering perspective, I want the listener session to maintain as best we can for reliability. And of course, one thing to also just note, we have multiple clusters, as you can see here, US and EU. We have multiple different endpoints. So if there is, let's say, something happening to whoever behind the scenes, we automatically flip over to your next cluster and go from there, your different nodes. That's more of a technical aspect, but just from your point of view, rest assured, we have multiple redundancies, both from our end and on your end, with the heartbeat and the silence detection. And of course, as we evolve with certain people, we have the brand new options here for essentially having, again, different, there's a bunch of people in there. Hello, guys. Different admins, tech admins, and all that stuff here. So if I want to do that, I can do that too. Again, stations, I'll go to ClassRock 2024. I'll go to my settings, and then I'll go to people, and there's that tech admin analytics viewer. And the very last thing I want to remind you of, which is super, super helpful, is this drop down and that knowledge base. It is such a great resource to learn more about what you can do inside of Revma. And again, cool things with like Triton ad integration, stuff like that. There's some really cool things you can do over there too. So I will check it in. Let's see, make sure last call for questions. Alice, I think you're good, right? Don't forget to check out the archive, rcsworks.com/rcs-live. Great resource for you. And of course, you can always check out our previous videos there. Reach out to us on our socials. Any questions, reach out to it directly. There's some great stuff here for you, because the idea is that we want to make your lives easier. That's the idea here. So if you have questions, we have answers. Reach out. I'll see you again on